Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hatchery 101 webinar series by Hatchery International. My name is Ben Normand, and today I'll be the host and moderator for today's discussion on digitization. Good information leads to good husbandry. Having access to real-time data has proven to be a game changer in capturing, logging, and analyzing your hatchery operation. As facilities become more digitized spaces, I will be bringing together a panel of experts to talk about how machine learning is improving aquaculture operations, flexibility, efficiency, and animal welfare. First off, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsor of today's webinar series, which is the Oxyguard International, without which this webinar series would not be possible. Now we'll introduce our panelists, and they will come on to join us here. So we have Mark Braceland, who's the Director of North America with WellFish. We have Chris Manley, who's the Outside Sales Specialist with Innovasea, and Matt Zimola, who's the CEO of ReelData. Welcome, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
morning, Ben.
Now, for those who are attending, I just want to remind you this webinar is recorded and a link should be available on the website and to you as requested within 48 hours. For our viewers as well, I'd like to remind you that this webinar is made in two parts. So the first part is based on questions that we have developed with panelists to discuss their expertise. But in the last 15 minutes or so, we'll switch over to Q&A from you audience members. I'd like to invite you to submit your own questions in the Q&A box, which can be found on the bottom screen, the menu at the bottom of the screen. Just a quick note as well, Chris is going to have to step out about 10 minutes early today. So please be sure to identify any questions that you'd like to pose directly to him so that we can be sure to get those answered before he has to take off. Now, let's get started with our first question. To your mind, what is the real core importance of data collection in hatcheries? Matt, if you'd like to take the lead on this one, please.
Yeah, I think, hey, everybody, I'm Matt, CEO of ReelData. Just a little bit about myself before I jump into the question. We are doing artificial intelligence in a lot of the land-based aquaculture facilities around the world. So in my mind, the core importance of data collection is just being able to do it, but doing it consistently over time, as a lot of more suppliers are coming to the industry and bringing digital solutions. I don't think there's a huge issue with accuracy and precision of the data collection procedure, but I think the consistency of it over time is going to be the most important part when hatcheries are starting to bring on new tools and they take the paper and they put it into a system. As long as it's consistent over time, as a machine learning supplier to the industry, we could do a lot with that information.
Great. Thank you very much, Matt. Farming is often done on a budget, and farmers have managed to raise fish using trusty old methods like pencil on paper. So what would you say to the common refrain, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Mark, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'd point out that we never used to vaccinate fish either, and it's turned out to be a bit of a game changer. So,
Good point.
we really are kind of entering a real digital age where, aquaculture really is a data accrual business in a sense. It's highly sophisticated, and we measure to keep alive aquatic animals. We measure a lot of things that as humans we don't really perceive ourselves. So it's really important to understand how data, and use data properly. I think that probably the simplest answer is that, it removes some of the human error aspects of, pencil and paper, and then kind of transcribing that onto a computer, say. Obviously, that also reduces the amount of labor that's required to do that. But I think as well, it's kind of changing those attitudes requires kind of ease of use, user interfaces, and people need to see the value in transitioning to have kind of automatic data collection. And I think that's kind of where, we're really getting to as an industry, and people are starting to see the benefits of moving towards kind of data accrual rather than just kind of handwritten notes, and then potentially then having to put that onto a computer and then hand to whomever else within an organization or out with the organization to see that data. So yeah, I think we're getting into a really exciting place now where things are easily accessible, they're simple to use, and as well just the added benefits that we're going to talk about later in terms of other production matrices or indices.
Yeah, I kind of piggyback what Mark said there. It's yeah, you have to, if it's water quality or whatever, the traditional method, and I've done it in marine hatcheries where you go and you're going tank to tank with a handheld meter, you're logging it, then you got to go into a spreadsheet, put everything on a spreadsheet, then you're analyzing. So there's a delay, right? You're not, unless you see something very glaring in that water quality while you're measuring it in real time, there's a delay, but putting that data from your probe to the spreadsheet, analyzing that data. So it's a very reactive approach if you see something that's not right. With having a system that's constantly real time monitoring the system, collecting that data in real time and analyzing it all at once, it's more of a proactive approach because you can see the system can recognize, hey, something's going on here that maybe could be missed down the line where you're just waiting to put it on a spreadsheet. And then if you have time to analyze that spreadsheet. So it's a more of the old way is more reactive approach. And then with this adding a real-time system in there that's constantly looking at everything, it could be more of a proactive approach. So you're tackling the problem perhaps more before it actually becomes a problem.
Yeah, I agree with everything that the guys are saying. I like how Mark brought up vaccinations because when asked this question, I was kind of thinking it isn't broke. Like I like to kind of challenge that. I think the system is still currently broke, and like seen it with vaccinations before that. Don't think it's broke until vaccinations. You start vaccinating fish, and it's a complete game changer. And I think I see a lot today when I'm speaking with clients, people in the industry. I think as we enter this age around digitization and machine learning and allowing farmers to really understand a deeper level of what's happening on the farm, we're going to look back at 2020, 2022 and think, how do we ever farm fish like that? Because I think we're going to get rid of the mortality incidents. Like every farmer I speak with too is always struggling. They're either struggling with growth, they had a biological issue. It's constant within our industry. So I do think the system is still broke. Yeah, and I think moving forward, the new solutions that are coming to market are going to help with that a lot.
Great. Thank you very much, guys. That's great points all around for sure. At the end of the day, system and husbandry control ultimately rests with the human operator, right? And so how is digitization helping these operators improve their own decision making and practices? So for example, are we seeing the development of, say, prescriptive technology? Not if you'd like to lead on that one, please.
Sorry, myself?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I think big challenges in the industry right now are kind of like two. It's really just information scarcity. Pen and paper is a constant thing that people use, and you can only do that a couple of times a day. People are resource strapped and things like that. I look at this as the biggest challenge in hatcheries. It's the information scarcity and just being able to keep it consistent. There's so many times that I've been at a farm where somebody does a feed check at a tank, like an operator, and then 2 minutes later, somebody else does a feed check, and the first guy said the fish were hungry, and then 2 minutes later, the guy said the fish are not hungry. So it's like, okay, well, the consistency really needs to happen in the industry, and I think a lot of the technical solutions that are coming are going to be help with that. I think around this too, as the industry grows, as people like Salmon Evolution or whoever, these big kind of players, post-smolt, and everybody's growing fish bigger and having these amazing results, it's just going to promote more hatcheries. It's going to promote more smolt and post-smolt facilities. but the talent really doesn't exist. So we're going to need to be able to adopt solutions that allow for more information in a consumable way and just keep that consistent over time.
And just a quick add-on too, like the hatchery, during the hatchery phase, that's the most sensitive part in the fish's life cycle, right? So having a consistent water quality, consistent feed, and having the data make decisions on that, so you're providing the best and consistent environment for the fish in the most sensitive stage is definitely critical. So, I would kind of argue that these type of systems are even more important in the hatchery phase versus when they go to more grow out facilities.
Great, thank you very much. So digitization and automation are often discussed simultaneously. How is technological development in hatcheries changing the nature of day-to-day work in hatcheries? Chris, if you'd like to take lead on this one, please.
Yeah, I think overall it improves efficiency of a hatchery, right? Typically, and again, I'm coming from a more of a tropical marine finfish hatchery experience, but there's a lot of labor associated with operating those facilities. For example, during a very heavy labor intensive period during a hatchery is when you wean from a live feed like Artemia onto a pelleted diet. So you're pumping a lot of pelleted feed into that system, and because you're trying to expose the fish into more of the pelleted feed to get them off of Artemia. So due to the hydraulic limitations of the tank itself, the tank's not really as self-cleaning. So, it's a potential. So what you're doing as a labor force in there is you got to siphon the tank multiple times a day. And it's a very labor intensive process, especially if you have 50, 100 tanks that you got to siphon. So how a system could alleviate that is, if the system can recognize, hey, there's food building up onto the tank, and have a self-cleaning tank mechanism that can automatically do that. So you completely eliminate the need for siphoning. So that's one way where it can help improve efficiencies in terms of labor. And then also, like we touched on before, is just monitoring water quality. If you have a system there that's constantly monitoring water quality real time, that system's doing that check for you. It's constantly monitoring it, it's logging it, and you can just, click a button and then you can see all the trends that your system's going through, rather than, having somebody go and check 20 tanks, because sometimes you want to check oxygen between 20 tanks and they're loaded differently. So definitely I can see improved efficiencies with the labor for sure would be a major player in this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, can I maybe just jump in there as well and just kind of echo those points from Chris and say that I think one of the most powerful things here is that it is really helping people that are working in hatcheries day to day make evidence and data-driven decisions, and kind of moving us away from like the power of anecdote. Anecdote, when we pass it up the chain, often isn't really listened to. But if you've got that data behind you, to really demonstrate how changing a system or a feeding regimen is actually having on that population of fish, I think that's really powerful. So I think it's giving people in hatcheries more validity in kind of opinions and demonstrating that through data.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. Just a real quick note again to attendees today. If you have any questions for the host, don't use the chat function, but instead please use the Q&A function. It helps us keep things organized. So how are we seeing digitization improve health and welfare outcomes? Mark, if you'd like to take this one, please.
Yeah, I think Chris kind of made a good point earlier about just the ability to be more proactive, understand environmental risk in a hatchery setting, make those adjustments, automatically, by setting thresholds for, especially if you think of oxygen, that would be the most long-standing kind of automatic kind of feedback loop of what is current and, you know, where do we want it to be and when do we need to dose and how much do we need to dose. But, you know, as an industry, we're moving so much further ahead in terms of other things that are all kind of compounding. And I think that's really important when we think of fish health and welfare, because that isn't just driven by one thing. It's not just driven by the environment that we're in. It's also driven by, you know, adequate nutrition, it's stocking densities, it's, you know, water qualities, it's complex. And I think we're probably some ways away from fully understanding that. Just all of the effects these things can compound to have an effect on fish health and welfare. But through kind of digitization and automatic data accrual and, you know, applying AI or machine learning and different models to this, we're starting to really see really interesting interactions between these compounding risks. And, you know, that's something, you know, at WellFish that we do is, you know, through the use of blood to understand robustness and health status of fish, we can start to, with all of this other data that's there, start to understand how the environment, nutrition, and so on, and these compounding risk pathogens, etc., are having on the fish's biological state. But, you know, this is relatively new. You know, it's been a long defining welfare in fish is difficult. Defining what is health is difficult. You know, people have different practices. Now, does that necessarily mean a fish isn't healthy or is in poor welfare? Potentially not. But, you know, we need to, I think you know, these are almost philosophical questions to some point. But, you know, it's difficult for us to relate to a fish. You know, mammals are somewhat easier for us to relate to. You know, they breathe air, they're easier for us to understand when you know, when your dog is looking healthy and has good welfare and is behaving well and so on. But yeah, through some of the really innovative companies out there and you know, academics, we're getting a better sense of what a stressed out fish looks like, you know, both in terms of appearance or you know, blood assays or you know, gene expression. We're starting to really understand better how you know, what health and welfare really looks like in fish, which I think is great. I think the next step really for us is starting to integrate all of these. You know, I said that earlier, like we accrue so much data and we're just accruing more now. But the missing link, I think, has been kind of that looking at the kind of these kind of interactions with all of these, and ultimately we were here to produce fish, right? So what are the interactions of all these things we're measuring on the fish's health and welfare? And I think, yeah, the last couple of years, and you know, in the next, you know, 5, let's say, we're getting further and further ahead, which is really phenomenal, and we're seeing that throughout the industry in multiple species. So it's a really exciting time.
Great points, Mark. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And you'll have to remind me at the next conference over a beer, we'll have to dive a little deeper into fish philosophy because that is intriguing area for sure. Excellent. Thank you. So in the face of a changing climate and significant cost increases, operators are having to examine all aspects of their operations to find efficiencies. How can digitization aid in this quest for efficiency? Chris.
Yeah, I think you know, tying it into your system automation would be one way to increase efficiency. So, you know, say if your you know, your hatchery operation utilizes a recirculating system, right? So in a recirculating system, water quality is, you know, biomass has a play in it, but it's mainly driven by feed. So feed dictates your flow. The more feed you have, the more flow you have. So, you know, typically in an older system, your pumps are delivering the max amount of flow it needs for that system at the maximum feed rate that system was designed for. And that could be, that's it could be the very last day the fish are in that system. But when you stock the system, the feed is much less. So therefore your flow doesn't need to be as high. So if you have a system there that's monitoring water quality or monitoring feed and knows the amount of feed that's going into the system, it can correlate that to your pump speed. It can slow your pumps down automatically. So then therefore your pumps are not drawing as much power required than it would if it was given its full system flow. So by automating your feed there and then finding if feed's wasted or not can not only help your water quality, but it can help your electrical draw of the system. And that is a major player in an operating cost in a hatchery, as well as you can even tie your carbon footprint associated to that.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. So the industry is always changing. We talked a little bit about this already here, but from the rearing of new species, the development of major post-smolt facilities, we're seeing practices shift over time. How can these technologies help producers who are engaging in new practices or sort of reaching into new fields? Matt, if you could take the lead on this one, please.
Yeah, I think getting getting into digitization and ML for new species or these new systems that are growing post mold up. I think it just to get to where we were today took a long time to get to be able to grow fish to we're just finally getting to the point where we can profitably grow fish to harvest size in land-based facilities. And I think getting into new species and new systems and things like that, when you're able to bring in the full adoption of digital systems, that was a huge learning curve that took a long time. And I think with what we're going to be seeing in the future is that learning curve, that length of time is going to be shortened by an order of magnitude. So instead of a decade or 2 decades in order to figure out how to grow fish effectively, leveraging what everybody's done with salmon. If we're going to new species like kingfish, for example, it's going to be way quicker to get that to profitability, to get that to massive scale, to get that to where we're not overly concerned with the mortalities and the issues and the risks that have happened over time. I think so being able to, I guess, learn from everybody as well as using these systems as a co-pilot and it's just going to make that time to get to understand systems or understand species a lot shorter.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And I like your phrase, using the systems as a co-pilot. That paints quite a good, an effective picture of the role these systems can play for you.
Yeah, we see imagine farmers are really smart. They're good at their job. We're seeing how the next few years it's going to be. There's a lot of these systems are going to pop up. There's going to be kind of a resource scarcity. So if you can leverage buying digital solutions so that the people you trust to grow your fish, you can make them 50 or 100% more effective. That's a huge superpower that I think a lot of the farms are going to start adopting.
For sure. And especially important, like you mentioned, in scarcity, where we're seeing, people are used to a wide variety, a plethora of options in terms of seafood, for example. And as some wild fisheries are harvested to the point where we can't harvest them any longer, I think there's some concern maybe that we'll see a reduction in that amount of choice. But if we're able, like you say, to bring that time period from sort of initial idea to market execution, shrink that using these systems, maybe that allows us to maintain more variety in the marketplace indefinitely into the future.
100%.
Yeah, I think as we prove the technology out and prove it out in terms of, because I mean we can grow fish on land, we can do these hatcheries and everything. It's just making them economically feasible. That's kind of, we're getting close, right? And getting there. But if we can prove these systems out and really cut efficiencies and cut operating costs, I think that's also going to benefit the industry as a whole of making it a more attractive investment option for these new projects and new larger projects we're seeing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. So as operators embark on this process of digitization, what are some potential challenges they should be aware of? Chris, can you start with this one, please?
Yeah, I think one thing is, coming from a, previous operator at a hatchery, is it's not a, hatchery is not a nuclear reactor, a nuclear facility where you can just sit in a control room, have a bunch of cameras and control everything from there. It can get close, but as much science and engineering that's associated in aquaculture, we're still dealing with a biological organism. We're still growing a biological organism, and if you use a recirculating system, your filtration's based on a biological process. So it's not as simple as you put X amount in and you get Y out. So definitely there's these systems can improve greatly on the efficiencies and operations of the facility, but there still needs to be human interaction there. There still needs to be a human interface too that understands the species, understands the systems, almost operate as a like a human fail safe. It's still as much as we can digitize everything and have the best design system. It's still an art to grow the fish. A lot of times the most important IP in an aquaculture farm is the staff that knows how to grow the fish. So definitely having that human interface is still critical.
I can take this too. I think I completely agree with Chris. I think as operators start looking at these solutions, one of the things that we run into a lot is technology for hatcheries, post-smolt on-growing facilities is different than the ocean-based tech. And I feel like a lot of the guys that are people that have been growing fish on land in these hatchery facilities have been overpromised by ocean-based technology and been burned by it a lot. So it is very important to understand that the technology that you want, if you do think it is going to add value, to make sure that you're searching out the right suppliers for it. Stocking densities and lighting conditions, for example, are completely different in land-based facilities than they are in ocean, which means that with higher stocking densities, the lighting in a RAS facility, turbid water conditions, really impact anything. If you're going to use like AI feeding or weight cameras or any, like even just kind of health and welfare cameras that you're putting in the tank, it's a lot harder to see a fish, and the solutions have to be developed specifically for the land-based system. So we see a lot of clients that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on ocean-based technology that is gathering dust in a corner that they bought 2 years ago that they're not using anymore. So I think that is a really, really important part of the next stages for the farms. I think it's a good also to kind of understand that we're not on autopilot yet. With the autonomous systems, they still need a human in the loop, constantly making sure that the models are working correctly, constantly making sure that your car is still on the highway and not in the ditch. So it includes, again, I come from the camera world, so making sure that the lenses are clean. Even though as a company we feed fish with AI, but like once a week we make our clients make sure that the system is working as it should. So building I guess checks and balances into standard operating procedures around innovative technology is important as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe if I can just extend it a little bit is, where I'm interested from a biological point of view is, how we're using this kind of digitization and greater depth of detail and data that we're accruing and using that in a way to predict or to optimize. I always think of, we can see the same phenotype from multiple genotypes, right? So the same way that we can see compromised health status from different causes. So we need to also be careful and validate some of the things that we're measuring and what they're actually causing. So I think we, and this is where machine learning and more data and bigger data sets is really going to help us here, is getting a deeper dive into those data sets. And digitization really helps that, because we get this automatic tracking, and we can start to build out, big data sets to understand relationships. I don't know. There's a great website that looks at correlations, right? And like weird correlations. So like there's like the amount of deaths in a pool to Nick Cage films, like, or what's his name? Bad example because I've forgotten the actor's name, but it's a really cool website. So it's like causation versus correlation type thing, where so we have to be conscious of that. And I think as biologists, that's something that we're always kind of harping on about, is that we need to validate, some of the kind of digital and tech platforms are phenomenal. They're bringing really great insights, but we need to understand the root causes rather than just, defining the symptom.
Absolutely. And this process and these technologies can certainly help paint a clearer and more accurate picture for us, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So touching a little bit on, and Mark, you actually mentioned this before in terms of creating data, building that case for people, say, higher on the chain, for example. Touching on that idea here, what does an ROI look like for these digitization efforts? And what are some other factors that operators should consider when building a case for funding for systems like this? Matt, if you could take the lead on this one, please.
This is it's funny. I wanted to hear other people's answer to this one. ROI on farms. It's actually kind of complicated, because farms are notoriously kind of not out of money, but it is hard to build something new into the budgets. So we do, and over the years, it's been kind of a conservative buyer type in fish farming. So it's not like the tech industry where if you go to your boss, they're just going to buy something, a new product for you. You really have to make a case for the return on investment. And it's challenging too, because fish, I'll use our AI feeding product as an example. Like, we immediately have an ROI on the balance sheet because we grow fish a lot faster. So on the balance sheet, you have we're able to show that those on the income statement until a year later. So that money actually doesn't get put in anybody's pocket. So I think it's important to understand the cap and be able to purchase solutions and kind of understand that relationship, where a product might give you an instantaneous ROI, but you're not gonna have cash in your pocket just because of the nature of growing an aquatic organism. It takes a long time. And then I think in our industry, values we really like bring products to the market. We're going to give 3x ROI, and the CFO of any fish farm is just going to sign off on that. It's a no-brainer. Turns out we were wrong. 5, 10, 15x ROI on any getting. One of the reasons is because it takes so long to actually generate the true revenue off of that. So I guess that's my little rant on ROI. I think it's important to really understand that a lot of solutions are going to have huge impact on the income statement, but it does take a production cycle or so in order to actually achieve that on the income statement.
Yeah, I think just even for us, so kind of an example story in my previous life prior to Innovasea, when I was working on in a hatchery where funds were pretty limited, and I wanted to get this is it ties in and get into a monitoring system, just a water quality monitoring system that would alarm out to if things were going wrong and everything. And I had to push for that. And essentially it came down to, look, is versus the cost of having overnight staff, you can have this, and then you don't need an overnight staff, and you have some costs there. But it's like, okay, would you rather not have a fail safe, and how much is the fish currently you have how much is the biomass in your system now worth to you? And if things go south and everything dies, is that not having a system, is that beneficial to you? So you got to understand also that it's not just efficiencies of the gain, but it's also the importance of the biomass you have fully stocked in your system, and how what's that price for that.
Certainly a lot of factors to consider for sure. And Matt, you're absolutely right to point out the sort of delay between, the realized benefit they're actually reaping in real time versus the sort of, spreadsheet line that comes from that. So very good. Thanks, guys. Great. I want to pivot into, say, success stories. Have we got any really nice sort of success stories of digitization that we'd like to share? And I'll put this to the group as an open question, so anybody can hop in first for this one.
Yeah, I mean, so in ours, or in a similar situation, it's not necessarily machine learning, but it's just system controls and improving efficiencies via system controlling. So and it's more tied towards automation than actually, like, true machine learning. But in systems that we've implemented in the field, you can go and manipulate valves downstream. So say if you have a gravity return going to a tank, so you can manipulate your valves downstream, and then your pumps will automatically recognize that. So then you're having the efficiencies, like I mentioned earlier, where you don't need that pump to be running at full speed to provide the flow when you're feeding a much slower flow rate. You can automatically adjust your valves downstream. The pump recognizes that change, and then you can gain efficiencies that way, lower your cost of operating and your electrical costs that way. And in terms of just simple monitoring systems too, I mean, me personally, having a monitoring system saved me, saved the fish that I was raising multiple times.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the phone call came at 3 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Eve, but still,
Always does.
it's still definitely multiple times. It definitely paid for itself by just having even a system control system. And then that was years ago, and the amount of technology and innovation that happened from now till then, I mean, I'm sure there's just going to be more and more of success stories going on out there.
Mm-hmm.
I can take it. Yeah, I think success stories in hatcheries and things like that. I think one of the things we see with AI or ML or digitization is that we're creating more information. And then the more information that we actually create, the farmers actually learn a lot more about their fish. So there's been a lot of time. I just love every time we go on a call and people are using our systems and like, I can't believe this is happening in these tanks. I never would have thought that. We learned a lot of about our fish over the summertime, or the wintertime, or nighttime or daytime. They just kind of learn a lot more about the biology. And it's always cool having a call and clients telling us about that. But I think one of the big success stories for us was recently when they had the volcanoes in Iceland. We have clients there that were able to use our technology. They didn't actually go on site to feed their fish. They were actually able to do it from their house with our camera system. So that reduced personal risk. People really liked to be able to do that. That was a big win internally at our company this year.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, in terms of machine learning, I think one of the biggest successes is been this ability to understand these relationships more, understand how all of the things that can impact is a fish's welfare and health status, how these are all kind of fitting together. And we're seeing such amazing strides and relationships of different markers that we haven't understood to be a symptom, say, of early infection or disease status, and really help drive farmers make kind of data-driven decisions about from things from like when to treat and how to treat, to understanding how well that treatment's gone and changing regimens and then continuously improving how we farm, which is really great. So
Great. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate that. Yeah. Sort of piggybacking off this question as well, what excites you the most when you think about the future of digitization in hatcheries, and either in terms of where the technology is going, where we want to see it to go, or the outcomes that we're seeing from use of this technology? Matt, if you'd like to take the lead on this, please.
Yeah, I think we're at the phase right now where it's allowing scale, and I'm really excited for scale. I want to see 500,000 metric tons of smolt produced a year. I want to see the first
Absolutely.
farm hit 50,000 metric tons of production. I want to see Maui or Leroy announce plans for a 100,000 metric ton farm. This is what I'm really excited about over the next little bit. Just the fact that we're at the point right now at technology in our industry where it's unlocking scale, and I think we're going to be able to see that shortly. I think some of the big players are actively talking about behind the scenes about what the plans are for land-based production for larger smolt facilities and things like that. So it's gonna be a cool couple of years, and I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I think on my end, what excites me too is the possibility of introducing new species into the area that we can grow. In the marine hatchery realm, you're doing well in a marine hatchery if you get 15 to 20% survival going from, hatch to a weaned juvenile. And we can incorporate this technology to incorporate machine learning that can improve the fish welfare, improve the, even analyzing behaviors of fish to mitigate aggression within tanks and everything. I think it can open up the opportunity to, where species that are very difficult to go through in the hatchery realm, but does pretty well in grow out. You just got to get through that hatchery phase by employing this technology that can go over and get you through that hump in the hatchery with decent survival and decent quality coming out. I think it could, potentially explode the amount of species that we'd be able to farm.
That's great, guys. The future indeed seems bright with this technology by our side for sure. So with that, we'll switch over to the audience Q&A portion here. The first question that we have is, so this person is curious how you envision the implementation of true AI. How do you envision avoiding overfitting as machine learning models transition to AI at a given facility? Matt, maybe you might be well poised to answer this one.
Yeah,
And
oh, sorry.
you go ahead.
Yeah, it's not really a big, we have a pretty large AI team, probably one of, if not the biggest, I think, in aquaculture in general. I think AI and ML or fitting is if you have a team that knows how to build models effectively, we don't really, there's a ton of best practices to use when we're building these models to avoid these. So for quick little crash course on machine learning, essentially you take a lot of information at a farm. I'll use weighing fish. So when we built our data set to be able to weigh fish, we took, let's call it 10,000 physical fish. We weighed them, we took an image of them. And then for our data set to train the model, we use only a fraction of that. We use, let's say, 6,000 images to train the model. And then now we have a model built, and now we have 4,000 fish to test out how that model actually works. So we weighed those 4,000 fish through our model and found out kind of the accuracies, the overfitting, and things like that. But it's constant for us. So we have a lot of infrastructure, digital infrastructure that allows us to work with farmers that when something is going wrong, we can update models really fast. So overfitting, I don't see as an issue within the industry, species quickly, or I think it for especially image-based artificial intelligence like camera systems is huge. People could change a light. Like as soon as you put I think I wrote about it on LinkedIn the other day, where lights are changing in farms, the kind of photo period people are playing with that, different lighting colors. That really affects models. So it's called distribution shift. So if we're in a tank and we're weighing fish, and then somebody tosses a blue light in there and it looks different on our camera systems, it will most likely affect how the performance of whatever we built is doing. And we have to actively go back and as fast as possible make a new model, adjust our new models. And that's where I guess effective communication and kind of those weekly checks and balances come into play. And that's just one of the, I guess, things that we actively try to do to make sure our models are always performing well. But honestly, overfitting on data, I don't think is a big issue if you have people that have kind of a background in machine learning and artificial intelligence on your team.
Like you say, it's important to keep checking so that how did you say it? Make sure you're on the highway and not in the ditch, right?
Yeah. Well, we used to use the term like Tesla's, like we're not on autopilot yet. You got to keep your hands on the wheel. You can't sleep in the back seat is what we were telling people. So that's just, we use kind of a lot of auto driving metaphors.
Great. Thank you very much. So the next question here is, as oxygenation technologies move forward to increase efficiency in general, is sensoring moving in the same pace? Like, so I guess they're curious about the development of sensor technology as a companion to these digitized technologies. So, Chris, this might be a good place for you to speak to.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been some improvements, especially in the oxygen sensor realm. I mean, the older method was using galvanic sensors where, you had to change membranes and you had to worry about corrosion onto the probe, and also the with a galvanic probe, you also have to have water movement across it. It just can't be stagnant just in water. So that was kind of the older method. Now, optical DO probes are becoming more of the norm. It's easier calibration. They hold their calibration really well. You don't need that. Even the membrane, the cap that they have for the DO probes, are definitely, they last a lot longer than what the membrane is for the galvanic probes too. So there's definitely your response time too with an ODO probe is a lot higher. So I think definitely on that end, in terms of oxygenation, we are seeing a move forward in that in efficiencies. There's some sensors out there that hopefully they can kind of develop. It's hard to. One of the key things in these systems are nitrogen based. Either TAN or nitrite, nitrate. So there's sensors out there, but getting a reliable measurement for that, especially for saltwater systems, is definitely something that can be improved on. But yeah, in general, I think there is a push to have sensors keep on pace with the growing technology.
I think you could also kind of look at what it actually is a sensor too. Like Mark's has a company that's essentially a blood sensor. We are a company that has an appetite sensor type of thing. So I think sensors are accelerating at a rapid pace.
Absolutely, and that's an interesting point as well. Is that what is a sensor? Is it necessarily a piece of technology, or is it a whole system that tells you what you need to know for sure? The next question here. So Is it right to say fish hatchery digitization has come to stay with all kinds of fish? And if it is so, how affordable is it to developing countries and smallholder farmers? So, sort of in the international context, outside of, say, major international companies, you know, how does this fit into that place? What's a good way to sort of break in with these technologies, especially in the context of, you know, a developing country?
I'm gonna pop off. So, but thank you
Certainly,
guys for having me. Appreciate it.
absolutely.
You all have a good one.
See you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.
I'll jump in. We have kind of a sister company in our portfolio that works in the Indian landscape. I think it's important to there is companies that are specific to different markets. So
Mm,
we are salmon, which is notoriously like it's higher priced. The solutions that are in the market are more expensive, but I know in India there is companies that are providing services. They have different business models. I know eFishery is a massive company. I don't exactly know where they are, but kind of they're doing a lot of work in ponds and things like that. And I think they were able to crack getting into that market. So I think it's just the solutions are there and they're coming pretty rapidly to the market. So I think it's
mm.
just find the right supplier for your needs. There's a couple of people that have been able to aggressively get into the markets that are a lower price point, like eFishery or AquaConnect and things like that. So I just be looking at those guys.
Great. Thank you very much. Perfect. This next question, there's a bit of context. They work in a small hatchery, and they're noticing that a lot of products that are on the market in these, you know, digitized spaces are designed for larger scale, right? You touched on scale there, Matt, for sure. Whereas they're a very small operation by the sounds of it here. So, do you have any suggestions, thoughts, or even approaches for them in terms of implementing these technologies and maybe finding a source that's more tailored for small operations such as theirs?
It's tough because anybody that's coming to market with kind of innovative technology isn't going after a small market. They're going after the biggest ones in aquaculture, right? Salmon
Mm,
farms, cages, the ongoing facilities, and that will eventually trickle down into kind of the smaller areas. I think two ways that if I was running kind of a smaller shop, I would be looking at there are solutions out there. Wouldn't be able to like biomass camera systems are expensive and things like that. And I'm not sure how what Mark's pricing models and how expensive his stuff is, but I think there are some stuff that has been in the market or that is a lower cost. And I think even with us, companies like us, we are always wanting to partner on research and innovation. I think if you can't afford or have the budget for some of these products, there are other ways to provide. It doesn't have to be monetary for a lot of the companies that are developing and innovating in the space. If you could help them develop a product together, that is a huge benefit to companies that are trying to innovate. So my money's one thing, but time and resources, you have experts, right? In your facilities. As a technology provider, we don't have biologists. We don't have people that have been on farms before. So there is ways to collaborate that just aren't on a purely cash basis, I think, is
mm.
a good look as well.
Yeah, I would say that a similar thing there. I mean, I think as technology drives forward, things do often become cheaper with time, as a lot of the kind of R&D costs to get set up and going commercially kind of get diluted somewhat. But yeah, I think that's a great point from Matt is kind of getting in there early and helping develop that product and becoming kind of a almost like an R&D space for companies in this market is a great idea. And I think that would also help demonstrate the value that it brings to even a smaller operation. And maybe you have to change the way that it's utilized compared to, some of the kind of behemoths out there. But I think it's finding something that will either fit and or improve your own husbandry practices. That's ultimately the aim, right?
Absolutely. You're right. And it almost doesn't matter the scale necessarily to see these benefits for sure. Well, listen, Mark and Matt and Chris, wherever you are there, we'll say we're out of time, unfortunately, here. It's been a really great discussion. And I really want to thank you guys for donating your time to discuss this with us and to enlighten our viewership is here as well. Uh, I would also like to thank the viewers for submitting your questions and participating in this broadcast today. So with that, Mark and Matt, I'll invite you to turn your cameras off and say goodbye. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Ben.
So, well, I'd like to once again thank our webinar series sponsor, which is Oxyguard International, once again, without which this webinar series would not be possible. For those of you attending today, I'd like to take a moment to remind you of our next webinar, which is next quarter, August 14th. In that, we'll be looking at pathogen management. And we're collecting a great series of experts to join our panel for that discussion. From there, I will say goodbye, take care, and have a great day.